The National News of Wales tonight, brought to you first by HTV.
Good evening. The stories making the headlines in Wales tonight. Miners at Point of Ayr plan a buyout in last-ditch attempt to save the pit. Dramatic. The future of North Wales's last deep mine hangs in the balance tonight after workers offered to buy the pit in a bid to save it from closure. The offer came only hours after RJB Mining announced that the loss-making colliery will close on Friday and 200 jobs will go. Union leaders are considering the company's £1.2 million price tag, which is less than half the money the men will get in redundancy pay.
It's been a day of high drama at Point of Ayr Colliery. First, the announcement this morning that the pit will close on Friday after 122 years. Then, late this afternoon, after further talks with union leaders and telephone calls to RJB's chairman, Richard Budge, in Brussels, the man entrusted with the shutdown arrangements said they were prepared to sell it to the workers.
Our decision is the same. We don't see the mine as being viable. However, the trade unions have expressed an interest in putting together a workers' buyout for the mine. I've cautioned them about the difficulties in doing that, but I've talked to Richard Budge and we've made an offer to sell them the mine as it stands, really for some equivalent to the written down value of some of the items underground. So we've offered them the mine for £1.2 million.
No one has any doubt that buying the colliery would involve big risks. Last year, Point of Ayr lost nearly £3 million, and with coal output still falling due to difficult geological problems in the main seams under the D estuary, this year's losses have already topped £2 million. But union leaders say RJB is acting with undue haste in shutting the mine, and they want the chance to see if it can be saved, in the way that miners at Tower Colliery in South Wales saved their pit.
I take on board what the company said. South Wales was a different prospect at the times. I mean, their reserves were proven reserves. Ours are proven reserves, but a little bit more difficult to get to. Yes, we'll need some cash input to get to them reserves, but we must go down that avenue. We must explore everything. We're a major employer in the area.
RJB is offering all the workers jobs at pits in Yorkshire and the Midlands, but for men like Safety Officer Charlie MacDonald, who's worked here 26 years, it's a difficult decision.
All my children and my family are Welsh speaking. They go to Welsh school. Myself, maybe I would consider it, but I think it highly unlikely of my family to move home.
Meanwhile, a management buyout of a West Wales anthracite mine at Cwmgwili has been successfully completed, saving 75 jobs. But the men at Point of Ayr Colliery will be looking to the South Wales valleys for inspiration. They'll be hoping to emulate the miners at Tower Colliery, who bought the pit just over 18 months ago and who are running it profitably.
New year 1995 and a new beginning for the men of Tower Colliery as they proudly march back to the pit after the only successful workers' buyout in the mining industry. Up until today, that is. 250 men pledged thousands of pounds of their redundancy money to help secure the future of their pit and their own futures. Now the 200 workers at Point of Ayr are attempting to do for Deeside what the Tower men did for the South Wales valleys. Take control of their own pit and their own destiny. Already worker directors at Tower have wished the Point of Ayr men well and offered advice and assistance. Offers of help have also come from Flintshire County Council.
I have offered the workforce the services of our staff in putting together whatever possibilities may exist for maintaining the future of this colliery, and we will be working with the workforce to try and achieve some answers to this terrible problem that they face.
Unlike the Tower deal, which took months to put together, the Point of Ayr men probably only have a few days or weeks to turn dreams into reality. Meanwhile, there was some good news in the mining industry today. A management buyout has been completed at the Cwmgwili anthracite mine near Ammanford, saving 75 jobs. The drift mine has been bought on a 15-year lease from the Coal Authority, which took over control after the previous owners, Coal Investments, ran into financial difficulties. The new company will be called Jewel Limited and plans to produce 1,200 tonnes of anthracite a week.
RJB Mining, the owners of the Point of Ayr Colliery near Prestatyn in North Wales, have called for a meeting with the unions tomorrow morning. Union leaders have told BBC Wales they believe a closure announcement could be made then.
The threat of closure once again hangs over the Point of Ayr Colliery. Union leaders say they're expecting bad news and miners here fear the worst.
We've known it's been coming for a while, so it's no surprise really. So it's just better wait until tomorrow.
I don't want it to close. Not at all. But I've heard nothing at all that anybody's coming.
We only found out this morning there was a meeting, so the men haven't been together yet to talk, so once they get together, we'll find out what's happening.
RJB Mining and union officials were not available to comment today. Both sides are expected to make official statements after tomorrow morning's meeting. Only then will workers here know for certain the future of the pit. Carol Green, BBC Wales Today at Point of Ayre.
The main news story in Wales tonight. Miners at Point of Ayre plan buyout in last-ditch attempt to save the pit. The details at 6:25.
In BBC Wales Today, in half an hour, miners' leaders have negotiated a stay of execution for the Point of Ayre colliery near Prestatyn in North Wales. This morning, private owners, RJB Mining, announced it would close the pit, which employs more than 200 people, and start removing equipment immediately. Now the company has agreed to give the unions a chance to investigate a possible workers' buyout. Join me in half an hour.
North Wales faces closure unless the miners are prepared to buy it back. Earlier today it was closing the last deep mine in North Wales, now says it prepared to sell the colliery back to the miners. The closure would leave just one deep coal pit in Wales, the Tower Colliery in the Rhondda, which was bought by the employees 2 years ago and is making a profit.
Miners arrived at Point of Ayre Colliery this morning expecting the worst, and at a meeting with senior managers from the Yorkshire-based RJB Mining Company, their fears were confirmed. Having lost around £5 million since privatisation last year, the colliery was not considered viable, and it was to close on Friday. The company said it planned to start dismantling equipment at the mine early next week, but after a further meeting with unions this afternoon, a stay of execution was announced.
We made an offer to the trade unions to sell them the mine, and we've asked them to go away and consult their advisors on that as quickly as they can. So they're doing that now.
The pit is being offered at a price of £1.2 million. The company says that would be more than covered by the redundancy payments available to the men, but has grave doubts whether a worker buyout here would succeed. The unions have welcomed the chance to try.
Well, there's a will in this pit to work. Now, our financial advisors will actually advise us and the men whether or not they think it's a viable proposition. We hope it is, and if that's the case, well, yes, we'll be recommending that our men can do that.
RJB Mining has agreed not to remove equipment until the unions decide whether they can make a buyout work. In putting that package together, unions at Point of Ayre will be taking advice from miners at Tower Colliery in South Wales, the only other Welsh pit still running. Workers there successfully bought out their colliery after privatisation. If this bid fails, it will leave just 300 miners in an industry which once employed more than 200,000 in Wales. Tim Hirsch, BBC News, at the Point of Ayre colliery in Flintshire.
RJB say they're closing Point of Ayre, but the workforce can buy it if they want. Leaders have negotiated a stay of execution for the Point of Ayre colliery near Prestatyn in North Wales. This morning, the private owners, RJB Mining, announced it would close the pit, which employs more than 200 people, and start removing equipment immediately. Now, the company has agreed to give the unions a chance to investigate a possible workers' buyout. Our reporter, Carol Green, is at the pit. Carol.
Well, it's been a dramatic day for workers here at Point of Ayre. First thing this morning, they heard that the pit was to close. Then by 4 o'clock this afternoon, they'd heard there's still a chance of saving it. The future of the Point of Ayre colliery and its 200-strong workforce hangs in the balance tonight. RJB Mining announced this morning production would stop at the end of the week and the pit would close after losses of nearly £5 million over the last 2 years. Union leaders moved quickly to win more time. They want to look at the possibility of buying the pit for its £1.2 million price tag.
I have grave doubts about their ability to put together a business plan that will be successful. But we'll give them every help we can over the next few weeks to sort something out. What I've said to them is that if that doesn't work out, we go back to where we were this morning, and we'll then begin the process of closing the mine.
We've got some breathing space, and that's all we were after. Now we can make some explorations and find out what exactly is available to us. Something that we didn't have this morning.
Miners here know there are serious production problems and that the long-term viability of the pit is by no means certain. However, news of the closure still came as a shock here and in the local community.
You always want to be in work for the rest of your life, but you know, you've got to take what comes, you know. And where we go from here is another thing. Apart from that, they're the bosses, it's what they say goes, isn't it?
Let's give some other people the option to maybe have a look at the colliery with a view to perhaps on a smaller scale keeping the colliery open. There are many people in the area that rely on the colliery.
The Secretary of State on a visit to North Wales was sceptical about a workers' buyout. He said there's no room in the industry for pits that don't make a profit.
It's a regrettable thing, of course, and it creates difficulties for the people who work there, although I understand there are opportunities for them either to transfer to other places or to take redundancy on the same terms as would have been offered under privatisation. But it underlines the importance of us attracting more jobs to Wales in the future.
For the time being, at least, production will continue at Point of Ayre. The company says it will still go ahead and close the pit if the workers fail to put together an acceptable bid. Meanwhile, RJB is still offering the workforce redundancy or transfers to its other pits in Yorkshire and the Midlands. So what are the chances of the workers here successfully buying the pit and saving their jobs? The obvious example to follow is that of Tower Colliery in South Wales. Here's our industrial correspondent, Miles Fletcher.
On the face of it, the outlook for a workers' buyout at Point of Ayre isn't promising. In each of the last 2 years, the pit has made losses of several £1 million. Its owners, RJ Budge, are under pressure to cut costs before their contracts to supply the big power stations expire in 1998. Then they'll have to compete with cheap coal imports. So many in the industry suspect that if Budge can't make money there, then perhaps no one else can.
I think 3 or 4 years ago they recognised that there were certain geological problems which they would have to overcome. They've been problems that they've been grappling with over the years, and it does appear from the news this morning that perhaps they've not been successful in doing that.
But at Tower Colliery, they were also told their pit was unviable back in the pre-privatisation days of British Coal. The new workers' cooperative proved that assessment 100% wrong, building up fresh markets for their coal and beating production targets. So if the men of Point of Ayre think they can do the same, the offer of help is already there.
Everything's feasible. We've proved that in Tower that it can be done, but I need the confidence of the men there themselves. They must feel confident that if they take an operation that they can be successful at it. I wouldn't like to have anybody going into a dull venture which ends up with more further despair for them. So really it's up to the men out there to decide if they think they can continue at Point of Ayre.
More than many parts of Wales, the North East has been hard hit by the rundown of traditional heavy industries. The many thousands of jobs lost in steel and coal have been replaced by a measure of fresh investment. The Welsh Development Agency insists the prospects of those companies bringing more new jobs are good.
There is quite a strong base of existing inward investors in the area, people who know from experience it's an excellent place to do work, not least because of the excellent workforce there is there. And we will be working hard to make sure that we get as much of the reinvestment as we can. And indeed we are talking with a number of potential new projects that are interested in considering that area as a point of location.
Yet miners at Point of Ayre are used to making good money. Typical earnings of around £25,000 a year are well above the Welsh industrial average. So if a workers' buyout doesn't save their pit, RJB's offer of jobs elsewhere in the company, in Yorkshire or in the Midlands, may be their only real option.
Well, I'm joined now by Philip McGreevy, Chief Executive of Flintshire County Council. How realistic is that workers' buyout?
Well, when we met the trade unions this morning, before we met with the management of RJB, they were very confident that they could achieve a management buyout. In fact, at that time, their concern was that they wouldn't have the opportunity to put their case and be given an opportunity to demonstrate their ability. Obviously, that's changed now, and we'll be looking forward to working with them very closely in the next days to see just how realistic we can make that opportunity.
Now, those geographical problems would still be there for the workers and they'd have to put in their redundancy money. Do you think there is the will amongst the workforce to do that?
Well, we've certainly had some brief conversations with representatives of the workforce this afternoon since the announcement by the company, and their indications are that they're very optimistic. Obviously, we'll be exploring that in greater detail with them tomorrow, because it is a very big challenge for them. But we'll be working with them as closely as we can to provide as much support and as much advice, together with our partners in the WDA and the local techs. We'll all be meeting tomorrow to explore every single opportunity.
Finally, if the buyout doesn't come off and the place does close, what kind of impact will that have on the local economy?
Well, firstly, can I just restate that a priority must be to give the buyout every possible opportunity. Less than 5 hours ago, we were faced with closure in 48 hours, so we've got to give that our best chance. If that fails, then our priority will be to ensure that the policies that we've used in the past to regenerate sites of former industry in Flintshire will be the same policies that we will bring forward to identify opportunities for new industry and new job creation on this site. Clearly, our ability to do that is weakened by the fact that we don't have the same level of grant support that we've had in the past, and we've already made that point to the Welsh office this afternoon.
Philip McGreevy, thank you very much. That's how events have unfolded here at Point of Ayre. Handing back to you, Jamie, in the studio.
Thanks, Carol. Well, the end of deep mining. Keeping the wheels turning at Point of Ayre as miners at the colliery get backing to fight on. Yechidar, Eisteddfod leaders make history by voting to sell alcohol to young people. Hello, good evening. Miners' leaders from the Point of Ayre colliery in Flintshire crossed the first hurdle in their bid to buy the pit. Yesterday, RJB Mining, who own the pit, said they wanted to close it. Today, the workers secured financial backing from council and business leaders to fund a feasibility study, and consultants will visit the site early next week to look at the plans. Here's our reporter, Carol Green.
Miners' leaders arrived at today's meeting knowing it was the first step on the long road towards their men saving their jobs by buying the pit. They asked the council for cash to find out how realistic a buyout would be and came away with its backing.
We've been given a positive response. They are prepared to fund for the kind of advice that we want, so we're going to take it step by step. And a lot will depend on RJB providing us enough time to carry out a feasibility study of the colliery. Because at the end, what we want is jobs for our lads.
We have got to use these studies to good effect and ensure that now that there's this opportunity being put down by the company, we've got to explore it to its nth degree to ensure that every opportunity for the pit and the workforce there and their long-term future is secured.
Production continued today at Point of Ayre. Miners here know they have just a month to decide whether to back the pit with their redundancy money or see it close. Today there was a mixed response to the buyout plan.
It's a thing you'd have to think about is we all need a job. There's nothing around here, so we need work. The only way they can cut down is by reducing wage costs, which means the lads will have to accept the fact they have to put their own money into it, and after putting their own money into it, they have then got to show a profit. And they can't show a profit without accepting less wages. Can't see it.
I mean, I don't want to move here, so I'm quite happy working here, so I'm prepared to have a listen to it, yeah.
Meanwhile, there was a word of warning from one man who's been through the buyout process.
Before they throw their money away on, say, trying to be another tower, think very seriously about it. It's so important. I mean, the redundancy money doesn't go far. They've got to realise that. It's got to be able to make a profit. It's got to have a future. Now, if they can answer them questions, then it's up to them.
Union leaders plan to update the workforce at a mass meeting at the pit on Saturday. It'll be the first opportunity to gauge support for a buyout amongst the men who could be asked to take the risk.
Well, I'm joined now by Keith Thomas, a partner with Ernst & Young, who are very used to advising on management buyouts. Keith, first of all, what advice would you give to miners who are thinking of buying out?
I think that they have to look at two key areas. One clearly is the market into which they'll be selling, which will be a different market to other mines that have been mentioned in your report there. And secondly, is the most important thing probably is cash. Companies go bust not now, in the future, not when they lose money. They go bust when they run out of cash. They have to look very, very hard at the cash flows they expect, what terms they'll be paid by their customers, how long they have to wait for their money to come in, and also how quickly they have to pay the cash out. In the short term, for wages, running costs, and in the long term for re-equipping faces, developing new seams, which can cost a lot of money.
But we've seen Tower Colliery stage a buyout. That's been successful. They're doing well. Can we expect the same at Point of Ayre?
I think it would be a mistake, as Tyrone O'Sullivan said earlier, to try and compare the two in many ways. Tower is selling a different type of product. It's anthracitic, is for the domestic market, and they've carved out their own niche. Point of Ayre, as far as I'm aware, sells bituminous coal, mainly power station coal. Their main customer, Fiddler's Ferry, power stations converting to gas. So it's dangerous to try and make direct comparisons between the two.
Well, that's the hard business end. How about the people in all of this? There are over 200 people involved.
It's important. Obviously, you have to be looking for jobs for all those people. What they have to look within the team that's there, I would say, is do they have the skills within the team to run the business? Not only will they have to produce the coal, they'll also have to sell it, which is important. And do they have the people in there that can do that? Or can they bring in people to help complement the team that they've got there?
Keith, thanks very much for talking to us. It has been the last working day for North Wales's one remaining deep mine. It's emerged that a joint venture could secure the colliery's future. Point of Ayre near Prestatyn is set to close with a loss of 200 jobs. But Telford-based Clay Colliery Open Cast Mine Company are negotiating with miners at the pit.
On the day the colliery should have closed, hopes of saving it were boosted when the company revealed they'd been discussing a deal with union officials. A temporary reprieve from closure was granted by owners RJB Mining, while miners considered a buyout for £1.2 million. Now Telford-based Clay Colliery say a joint venture could save the pit.
Deep mine industry and the open cast mining industry are one and the same thing. We need each other, we can trade together. Our competition is united competition of imports. I think that Clay Colliery and the miners together can make a go of it.
The company already operates 2 open cast sites in North Wales, this one at Flint and another at Brumbo. They expressed an interest in buying the pit prior to privatisation and say that as the 2 types of coal have to be blended for power station fuel, the deal makes sense. News of the idea has been welcomed.
I wouldn't like to put too much of my own money, but obviously if we could get it back, all well and good, because I think there is definitely a future at the colliery.
They took the risk in Tower, and I don't see why somebody should not take the risk here in Point of Ayre, and especially for somebody to help them from the outside.
But there are some who believe that whoever takes on the pit will face serious problems making it pay.
I would like to see it, but I don't think so. Because the coal now, it's too far away to bring out, and the cost of so many belts running, so many men, it's too expensive.
Although news of the talks has lifted some of the gloom among miners at the pit, the company and union officials admit there's a long way to go before Point of Ayre's future can be secured.
The last deep mine in North Wales is set to close. Unions advise miners against a buyout. Hello, good evening. The last deep mine in North Wales is set to close. Production will stop at Point of Ayre Colliery near Prestatyn tonight after union leaders said they would not be recommending a workers' buyout to their members. They took the decision this morning after hearing details of a financial report on the pit's long-term future. The 200-strong workforce will vote on the recommendation tomorrow. Carol Green has this report.
Miners' leaders knew today's financial report would seal the pit's future. Cardiff-based consultants KPMG have spent the week looking at the pit's books to see if a buyout could be made to work. Privately, many expected bad news.
Today didn't come as any great surprise to the steering committee. We've given them information as we've gone along, and they've come up with their view, their overall view on the future of the colliery, and we have to be big enough to stand up and say we don't think it's going to work.
I can't say it came as a surprise. I very much admire the employee buyout team for what they've done. The conclusion I have always thought would be what it was today, but it's a disappointment for everybody. It confirms the closure of the mine.
RJB Mining say the last coal will be produced tonight and salvage work will begin early next week. The 200 men here have been offered redundancy or transfers to RJB's other pits. In the community where jobs are scarce, news was just beginning to sink in.
It's been hard, very hard for me to get a job now, like, anyway, especially at my age, like. But it's unfortunate, it's just one of them sad things. Bit of Welsh history going again, isn't it?
Everyone's down. Everyone I talk to are down, like, you know, so sad news all around.
Today's recommendation not to pursue a workers' buyout will be formally put to the miners at a mass meeting here tomorrow. They're sure to back their leadership. Their decision will bring to an end over 130 years of deep mining in North Wales. Carol Green, BBC Wales Today at Point of Ayr.
Well, joining me now from our studio in Mold is the local MP, David Hanson. Mr. Hanson, do you think more could have been done?
I think the miners and the local councils in Flintshire and Denbighshire and the Welsh Development Agency have done all they can to try to prove the viability of the pit. And the news today has been extremely disappointing for the miners and their families and the community I represent.
What does this mean for the community?
Well, it means initially 220 plus jobs being lost as of this evening. And that means a loss to the local economy of wages, it means a loss to many contractors to the pit, and it means a further blow to Flintshire's already highest level of unemployment for several years. It's a devastating blow today.
Will you be calling on government to provide some grant aid to offset the job losses?
Well, I'll be contacting the Secretary of State for Wales to ask him to meet urgently with the local authorities and the Welsh Development Agency to look at how help can be given to the area, particularly in North Flintshire. We have assisted area status in Chester and Birkenhead, our nearest competitors in England, and we don't have it here in Flintshire and North East Wales. We desperately need assisted area status, we desperately need further government assistance, and we need some personal action by the Secretary of State to counteract the body blow we've received today.
David Hanson, thanks very much for talking to us.
Thank you.
Well, the closure of Point of Ayr marks the end of an era in North Wales mining. At its height, the industry employed more than 15,000 men. Sean Lloyd has been looking back.
The standing remains of Bersham Pit. It closed in 1986, leaving Point of Ayr the only working deep mine in North Wales. Although overshadowed by the size of the South Wales industry, in its heyday there were 34 pits in the north, where 15,000 men clawed out their livelihoods.
South Wales coal was export coal. North Wales coal went to a domestic market, which was in some respects a much more secure one. And so the industry didn't suffer as badly in the interwar depression as South Wales did. So it was really a foundation stone of North Wales industry.
But the price of coal was dear. In 1934, 266 miners lost their lives in an explosion at Gresford. Only 9 bodies were recovered from the disaster, which after Senghenedd was the worst in Welsh mining history.
The recommendations that were made from the inquiry to the Board of Trade dealing with mines, certain changes were made to the law that tightened up some of the things that had gone on at Gresford to make sure they couldn't happen again.
In post-war years, as coal mining moved into gradual decline, mechanisation helped save Point of Ayr. But it didn't escape the strikes of the 80s, and the mine suffered a bitter split.
Bersham Colliery was out entirely, and Point of Ayr there was probably about a third out on strike at the beginning of the strike, but that changed as the strike went on. Quite a number went back.
Bersham was picketed out and stopped in Point of Ayr. Most of the pit, bar about 80, went to work. And remember then, it was so easy to join the other side. It was so easy. It was hard to keep faith with democracy.
In 1992, the pit fought closure and won, but today marks the end of Point of Ayr and coal mining in North Wales.
Industry has disappeared today in a cloud of dust. Demolition experts blew up the pithead winding gear at Point of Ayr Colliery almost a year after the pit closed. Nearly 200 miners lost their jobs, but 12 months on, most of them have found other work, and hopes are high now that new industry will be attracted to the old Point of Ayr site.
The pithead winding gear at Point of Ayr has been a landmark for more than a century, the proud symbol of a once thriving coalfield that employed nearly 20,000 men across North East Wales. Today, it all disappeared at the touch of a button.
3, 2, 1, fire!
Seeing the huge structure crashing down was an emotional moment for Brian Baldwin, who worked down the pit for 26 years before RJB Mining closed it last August after losing £5 million in 18 months. He and his colleagues had to accept that geological problems made it financially impossible to dig out the vast reserves of coal that still lie deep under the seabed in the Dee estuary.
Because there's a lot of happy memories that we had from the pit as well. All the good lads that we had to work with as well, you know. So, yeah, it's upsetting, but there's not a lot you can do about it now. It's a sign of the times.
Contractors have sealed up the 1,000-foot deep mine shaft and the underground workings have been flooded with seawater. On the surface, the site's been cleared and could be redeveloped for new industry.
It's a sad day to see it coming down. It's the end of an era in North Wales, the last pit, deep mine North Wales. But we'll move on from here.
We want to look at it in the context of the development plan for North Flintshire and the other areas of employment land that we have available in the area.
One piece of headgear has been preserved at Greenfield Valley Heritage Park, but at Point of Ayre there'll be no lasting memorial to the days when coal was king.
At Point of Ayre Colliery near Prestatyn. Point of Ayre was the last deep mine in North Wales. The site will now be redeveloped for industry.